All right, so I got the recording going, got the stream up, so I guess let's go ahead and jump in. So anybody who finds this, welcome to Second Scout, another episodes. I'm your host, Potato RTS, and with me, as always, Dr. Dabston. So how are you enjoying ranked? I saw you playing last night. Got the ranked servers for about a day now.
Yeah, so I have no complaints. I got a pretty good start myself. Went 5-0 in my placements, which I think we figured out. I think the highest you can get rated is Plat 3, so that's what it ended up being. Unfortunately, lost a couple after that. I don't quite have the elo to keep that anyway, so I wasn't really expecting much, but was still a fun situation. Haven't had any complaints so far. The big thing that I think everyone's going to end up talking about here is the mangonel nerf. So that definitely had an effect in some of my games, but we'll get to that here in just a minute.
Yeah, so as you can see, I already got the server side patch notes up, but we're 1 week into the big update, which dropped last week, so we already talked about all those balance changes. Have you run across into any new strategies on ladder from the recent balance changes, or has it changed anything on the civs you play?
Well, as far as the civs I play, English is one of the main civs, and I think we already all saw one of the new build orders from them with the Muslim versus Wham's game. The Muslim went with the barracks right off the bat, sent two Dark Age Men at Arms right to Wham's gold, and it has a big effect. So that is already one of the new build orders that we are seeing. And then I know the Dark Age Wheelbarrow is as well one of the newer build orders for the English if you want to go with that one.
Yeah. I also know you play Abbasid, so you mess with the feudal military wing at all, or
I have not tried it yet, but I have heard and seen a lot of people go with the military wing in third age rather than getting the culture wing with the research upgrades. Instead, they're getting the military upgrades because see just less of an impact. They're putting more of a focus on their infantry based army.
makes sense. I've been trying, 2TC into Burgrave as HRE, and it feels okay actually. It's just I just can't seem to parlay that power spike into it actually winning. So still some tweaking, I think, but I don't think it's that terrible.
I could see the Burgrave. I don't know about the 2TC into it yet. I still think it's going to be a hard one to sell for HRE going with multi TCs. They're already kind of a civ that feels like they're not necessarily behind in feudal age. They just don't have anything too special going for them, so
Yeah.
that just sets them behind a little more.
Yeah, I've tried it on one town center. You just don't have the economy to maintain the production while adding siege and any archery range units you want. So you really need the extra juice there. So it's kind of tough to get it optimized.
Makes sense. Yeah. I'm not an I actually did have one of my first HRE games the other day in one of these Nomad Mega Random games, which have become very very popular even in the pro scene now. You see a lot of the pros playing the 8-man Nomad Mega Random games, and that was one of the ones I got a solid 8 relics right off the bat, but just wasn't able to do too much with it. I
Eight
felt good.
relics.
Yeah, I felt good about it. But playing against 6 or 7 other pros, I kind of got wiped pretty fast later on.
Man, you should have surrounded your base with keeps with relics in them.
Yeah, I managed to put a couple outposts around, and that's where the additional relics went rather than the regnants. But it just still was a little too late when it came to the overall map.
That's funny. Um, Actually, I'm gonna pull up the win rates so far. So this is not reflective of the mangonel change. I don't think this is just gonna be the games played up to that point. So interesting kind of list here. It's all pretty closely clumped together. It looks like Chinese players are still sort of struggling to get their changes figured out. They're currently last. But yeah, everyone else is pretty close. Uh, French leads the way with no changes. Everybody just builds nice and easy.
Yeah, one thing I would say is I'm sure the win rates and pick rates vary pretty significantly as far as the elo rating goes. So
Yep.
that always can have some effect. But it is nice to see the variance of the win rates go down significantly. I know there were some patches where we saw, win rates up in the 60s and lose rates below the 40s, and that's where it's kind of the balance that the game wants to be at is 50% for everyone, and that's where they're getting a lot closer to that, it seems like.
Yep. English above 50% now, and if I actually go to the rating range, if I let's filter by 1600 plus, and gives me a nice little warning up top. It says there's not a whole lot of games played yet. English is up to 48%, which prior to this patch, they were down in the low 40s, maybe even below 40 at some points. So looks like the change is, yeah, still not enough games to know for sure, but it looks like they might have done something.
Yeah, and one thing you'll notice about the higher elo rated games there is there's you see the bottom floor win rate is actually a little bit higher for that, which is good to see. A 47% win rate, and a lot of people still see Avocet as one of the OP civs now since the update. Yet they're on the bottom as far as win rate goes. So it doesn't always have an effect with what you're thinking to how the game is actually being played as well.
Yeah. So we'll see how these numbers sort of fill in as we get a bigger sample size. But so, like we alluded to earlier, not only did we get the big patch last week, but we got a nice little server side patch, which I I don't know about you, but I wasn't expecting this at all. This kind of seemed like it came out of left field.
Yeah, so I don't think many people were expecting this, and it is actually a much bigger a change than what people actually realize. With the server side patch, it allows them to pump these updates out much faster, and that way, all these complaints about, hey, why don't you hot fix this real quick, hot fix this real quick? They didn't have that ability to beforehand without a server side. Well, now they do, and now you might see those quicker changes when you have things such as villager gathering, completely bugging out, or some of these other things that have been very big concerns. I don't know for sure if they've changed that one yet, but I know they need to go ahead and hot fix that one here soon.
Yeah, so they did hotfix. So this was a pretty big topic of discussion in the EGC Discord for Golden League. Was the villagers when they get harassed by a scout, they do some sort of animation that prevents them from gathering resources. So when they doubled the attack speed of the scout, it made it so pretty much you're taking a villager away because they can't gather. And so they did hotfix that in the server side update. So pretty optimistic that now we don't have to wait for like a month to get some of these big issues fixed. Like the one I'm sure it'll come up is the bug where if you're gathering deer and you run and your
Exactly.
villager goes from a deer carcass to a sheep carcass, they kind of just don't do anything.
Yeah,
Um,
I know there were a couple of games I was covering this past weekend and casting that actually ended up probably having a significant outcome on the win loss of the games, and those are in Golden League, so this is money on the line tournaments, and you really hate to see things like that, and so that's really where this patch, the server side ability should not have that in the future.
yep. So excited to be getting more timely updates. But in addition to that little bug fix there, we got a pretty big balance change dropped on us that I don't think anyone saw coming. So mangonel projectile area of effect radius reduced from 1.25 to 0.75 tiles, and since it's an area, um, instead of just a linear distance, that drop is actually quite significant. I think it comes out to like a 66% reduction of area that's affected by the mangonel. So definitely going to change some things.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard a lot already that the mangonels are basically worthless. It's one of those things that the age is always a game of chess essentially, where there's always a counter unit, rock paper scissors, and it doesn't seem like the mangonel counters the units it's supposed to anymore. we will, I'm sure, see them change as the developer note right below it says, we realize this is a dramatic reduction of power, but their goal is to push it away from siege heavy comps right now. I think this was more of a quick fix from them saying, hey, we hear what you're saying about the siege situation. We know this isn't a long-term fix, but this is the fix for now, just to change the state of the game, to give us a little bit new meta shift where we aren't seeing the same things over and over again.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw this, but Hut, prior to this change, she put out a pretty long video of kind of his thoughts on siege and defense, static defenses, towers, walls, keeps, and just kind of the late game of AOE4 in general. So I guess what's your opinion on just the status of siege as a whole, and how it relates to walls and keeps, and how that
So,
dynamic goes?
so I think the problem was less with the siege and more with the I wouldn't even necessarily say walls, but walls and towers. Now in games, you'll kind of see outposts or even wooden fortresses go up and create this like line of defense that it's hard to breach through without siege. And so the next step once you see that kind of wall come up is I need to build trebuchets, or I need to figure out a way through that siege, and then that creates this kind of, okay, I'm going to create trebuchets, I'm going to create springolds, and then it becomes this siege war, which it ends up being. And this is all directly because these towers and keeps are so hard to get through once they end up coming up. And so I have heard a couple changes that have been mentioned with regards to walls, with regards to building walls and things like that. And so I would say the main ones that I would like to focus on that I think would be a huge beneficial change would, one, the as walls are being built, especially stone walls, there needs to be a way to either torch down a stone wall or them to take more damage, even more than the 50% additional buff that happened more recently. And then also, I think with stone walls, especially if you destroy one wall segment, it should destroy the ones next to it as well. So it creates more space, more of a rebuild. And then lastly, stone walls and then stone keeps as well need to have stone for repairing rather than having wood to repair, because that's more of a vital resource that gets depleted on the map that I feel like people don't kind of accrue as much of.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, the mangonel change. Eh, I thought mangonels were fine until late, like mid to late Imperial, where you started getting up into like that 5-6 range, because because prior to that, when you only have a couple mangonels out, you can still gap close with cavalry and get on top of them, and uh, but once you hit that critical mass, your army just gets destroyed before it even gets there, and so then springolds are the only counter, and so that did get a little annoying. So I do agree something needed to be done, so that
I
you can
could
at least
see
get to the
them.
mangonels with cavalry, but siege
Yeah,
isn't going away. Like we
right.
talked about, you're still gonna have, uh, you know, putting the keep up with boiling oil and then sticking your 3 trebs behind it and slowly pushing your enemy. Like that's not going to change with this.
Right. And so I also think with the mangonels, they still need to be utilized for what they are for, which is the countering the big ball of sea or ball of infantry that you're
Yeah.
facing, which is, the archer balls, which you're going to start seeing a lot more from this. That you will start, I promise you, in every game or a lot more games, you'll start seeing heavy balls of archer, heavy balls of infantry because of this. But really, the mangonels just need to focus on infantry itself and have you see this in a lot of other units, whether it be springles having bonus against siege. The mangonels need to have specific bonus against infantry and maybe even less against cavalry, so then
Mm.
that creates more of a counter unit for them to say,
I
hey, cavalry
would like that
really
change.
really
Yeah.
can crush that. Because I've seen groups of 100 horsemen going after one of those, mangonel lines of 12, and then the horsemen just don't even get close. And it's
Yeah.
just, it needs to be able to create a way to counter what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a little worried about mass like hand cannons now. I haven't had a game since this update go that long, but that feels like there's not going to really be a counter because they're population efficient, and now I don't even know if there's anything that trades decently well on like a resource basis with them.
I
So,
mean, it'd have to be horsemen, but again, if you get that critical mass that you kill so many that your horsemen can't get close, or only a few get close, it isn't enough to wipe out that ball.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Still some work to be done. I think. I don't think it's my least favorite part of the game, like late Imperial, but I still don't think it's not unfun. It's not unfun. It's just not my favorite. You know what I
And
mean?
I think at that point, the game, at least at our elos, is mostly decided, and this doesn't mean
Yeah,
as much for us compared to these higher level pros that
yeah,
actually have these games going out to where we've seen this past weekend hour-long games, even longer. We saw a wonder victory this past weekend in
yep,
Golden League. That just seems absurd with me even saying that, because pros are so good at utilizing their resources and things like that. So that's really where this will have more of an effect there.
yeah. I don't know about you, but watching Hut's video kind of a little puts it in perspective just a little bit how much different the game is for the really high level, because just the tower spam with emplacements is just not something that I really come across all that often.
Yeah, I will say playing those Nomad Mega Random games, it's they're everywhere. And
Yeah,
that's like the easy thing to do. What else are you gonna do with floating resources if you
yeah,
have
because
max
they want the vision anyway,
yeah.
and I might as well just stick a Springald emplacement on there.
Yeah, and then the sprinkled emplacement does the full range damage, so it
Mm-hmm.
just again it creates that line and it creates that defense for your siege for whoever else. It's just like another unit there that's actually, stronger than a regular sprinkled going to be against infantry units.
Yeah. Uh, so we did get a couple other changes here. So ram bonus damage versus walls increases a little bit. Uh, could help in a ram rush if your opponent gets palisades up. Yeah, I
I
don't think
think
this does
that
anything for late game.
the key there is what people don't think about is everyone's complaint was move stone walls to castle age, and
Yeah.
rather than doing that quick change and moving stone walls to castle age, they're giving a more ability to counter stone walls in
Mm-hmm.
feudal age. So that's where I kind of like they're saying, hey, again, we hear what you're saying, and rather than doing exactly what you're saying, we're going to kind of do a circle around fix that we think will be better in the long run, and they'll probably add on a couple more fixes as well, maybe like the one I mentioned with the ram breaks the middle wall and it breaks the two outer pieces as well.
And then we have the monks that get the speed nerf while carrying the relic, so similar to the professional scout nerf from a while ago, carrying the carcass. So this is interesting, I think. I think it's an HRE nerf with the speedy prelates.
That is true. I think
Yeah,
this makes sense though when you think about warrior monks being slower than prelates with
yeah,
a relic. You're like they're on a horse and they're slower than a monk that just can run around with a prelate. It just seemed kind of a nerf like that seemed like a really big nerf to Roos back in the day, and now this seems like it's just put them all on that level playing field that says, hey, we're really gonna make this be an investment for you to get these relics in, rather than being able to just immediately pull them back.
hmm. And then so we talked about the villagers, and then Mongols, a little bit of a con nerf, so they're not going to be quite as annoying. So a little bit less range and a little bit less weapon damage in feudal and castle.
Yeah, and then also the melee and ranged armor got nerfed in from
Oh,
castle
yep.
from 1 to 0. So really the key here is they want the con utilized as a better scout, a buffing unit that is a scout that says, hey, I'm going to give you vision, I'm going to make my army better, rather than saying, hey, I am my own army. Because that's what we were seeing with the con was, your main force is going to be over here, and the con is going to cause the opponent to have another army force that is single-handedly there to stop the con. A lot of times, building production buildings that they wouldn't even want to build either.
Yeah, I hated having to drop a stable and get a horseman just to chase the con around. So,
Exactly.
yep. And then a couple more. So Abbasid, they sort of detuned the Campbell Archer a little bit
I
from
think
where it was.
I laugh with this one because I think we mentioned this in the last Second Scout podcast that said,
Yep.
hey, the developers already noted that camel archers were most likely going to be OPs, so they said changes were most likely going to come. And who we didn't expect them to even come this fast with the server side patch. And, they came in a week, not even saying, hey, all right, let's tone it back just a little bit. Let's make it, a more level playing field. We don't want to see these full camel archer armies that are once again uncounterable. So they made them a more counterable unit with that health nerf, as well as that the speed nerf puts them on level playing field with horsemen.
Yep. So yeah, but the health nerf, archers actually trade decently well with them again. So
Exactly.
that's nice. And then some matchmaking tuning. So yeah, I've seen some posts on Reddit where some unfortunate like 1100 elo player has to like get matched up with the Muslim.
Yeah,
So
so one thing I'll say is, definitely before the patch, you saw some variance just with the higher rated people. This will make it more beneficial for them, especially.
mm,
And on our playing ground, we still should kind of find the matches pretty similar. I didn't have too many where it was, oh, I playing this guy who's 300, 500 elo higher than me. Occasionally it happened. I will say with ranked, your first placement games, you might get matched against some people higher, but that's expected. That's the placement games. They're trying to find your elo after your five placements. That's when you'll kind of start to find your level and figure out pretty quick where you're at.
mm, indeed. So uh, any other just big impressions on since the update? Any?
I think the big thing that everyone's focusing on lately has been the siege and the negatives about it, and really the what I want to focus on is the server side patch and saying, hey, they are now pumping out updates. They're now listening to people. Stuff's coming out way faster, and so I think this is really where it's the foot forward for the game in the right direction in the long term here that has been heard a lot of complaints here recently.
Definitely. So yeah, hopefully we get that villager bug fixed. So for those that don't know, if you go professional scouts and you bring the carcasses under your town center, if your villagers finish with a deer carcass and then go to a sheep carcass, they get bugged out. They only have 10 carrying capacity, and then they just kind of get stuck in this animation loop. And so they're pretty much idle, but it won't actually show you that they're idle. So it's pretty
It's an easy fix
unless you know what
if
to
you
look for, it's pretty
notice.
difficult to catch.
Right, but it's even hard to catch if you know what you're looking for because a lot of times the guy's sitting there gathering, but all the easy fix is if you force drop off, it fixes it and they can go back to their gathering. But it's just hard to spot, and it's one of the things that you won't really notice until maybe after the game if you're watching your game or analyzing it and kind of trying to figure out things to work on or where you went
Yeah,
wrong, and all of a sudden you're like, that's something that kinda affects the game in the long term, especially if it's multiple minutes that these, villagers may be bugged out.
yeah. So yeah, especially if you put your sheep like inside your town center, you can't really see what the villagers are doing.
Yeah, so,
Or
one thing I guess we can actually cover on that, I don't know if you have it available, is the new civilization changes for this weekend's Golden League. So I know that they switched a couple, because they said, "Hey, this is the non-meta civilizations.
yeah,
We are going to go ahead and we're gonna play it one weekend." This was right after a patch, so then we're gonna resend out a survey to the pros again to figure out the new non-meta civs, or meta civs on each map, to ban. And so there's a couple shocking ones. I don't know if you have the ability to pull it up, but I'll go ahead and touch on Mongolian Heights. We actually see English, HRE, and Mongols as the banned civs on Mongolian Heights, which before this, English was didn't get any love either. They weren't banned, but they also, weren't even picked a ton. But this is where,
yeah.
since the patch, we're seeing English a lot more, and apparently they are strong enough to get that ban on Mongolian Heights.
What
El-
what about that map specifically for English?
so I don't really know what everyone loves too much about English on that map.
Is it the longbows to deny the fishing?
It is, but now I think it's a combination with the Dark Age Minute Arm Rush because if you get a minute arms, I don't know if your opponent's going to have the ability to make a dock. or build a dock at all. So
Uh,
so
or,
a
or
dark
or
edge
you're
men at
if you're
arms.
going fishing, you're delaying your gold, and so you're just never gonna hit feudal.
Yeah. So there's a
Okay.
couple. I mean, I'm not really for sure. I obviously there's multiple different build orders and things that English can do. I just apparently it's always been one that it seemed okay. They tried to use it as a pick on Mongolian Heights, and it never seemed to get that win rate that they expected. But now it at least has that mentality that says, hey, there's different options now, and it's really scary to be there.
Hmm. Yeah. Then I did notice HRE got banned and Delhi's free now.
And that's the scary part because I think that is the map where Delhi is the you used to see the build where you build your dock, you get a couple fishing ships out, and then you go build a dock on your opposite side. Or you might even start with a dock on the opposite side right next to your opponent's dock, and you can sit there and fish while your boats are attacking your opponent. So it denies your opponent's fishing, whereas you're beefing up your economy as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of Delhi on Mongolian Heights. But you can't forget that there's still that internal ban per map for your opponent. So
Yep.
we could also see Delhi just being the immediate auto ban for the 4 Civ there, which I think will most likely be the idea.
I'm a little surprised they banned HRE. Like I get it, the hybrid map, but I didn't really see HRE get played a ton this weekend or this
They
past weekend, and when they did get played, they didn't really do too well. I
you
think that
You are correct there, but I think the big thing is that the pros, because you will also notice that on Boulder Bay, Roos is not banned out either. Which previously before the patch, Roos was that we're going to beat you in feudal every single time on these hybrid water maps because we can change our ships from those fishing ships to the Lodge attack ships, and then immediately start killing your fishing economy before you're even feudal or before you have the time to get out your own military ships. And so that's where now we see Boulder Bay does not have Roost Band, nor does Mongolian Heights. But does that mean that the fishing is that nerfed that hard, or they think other civs now have the slight leg up there?
ah, I didn't see the Boulder Bay change, so that's kind of a bummer because the Rust Mirror just completely ruined that map, and I hope we don't see it this weekend because we got good Boulder Bay games,
Yeah, it
and
used to be
yep,
the Roost mirror that the first person who hits feudal wins the game, and then
yep,
it's over.
yep,
But no, I still think once again, there's always that ability to ban that 4 Civ out. So now you have to pick between on Mongolian Heights between Roos and Delhi, or on Boulder Bay between Roos and eh. That's probably about it. I
yeah.
don't know what else is that viable on
Who
Boulder Bay. You saw a
who did
lot of
they ban?
Chinese
Who's the new
this
bans
past.
on Boulder Bay now?
So the bans on Boulder Bay is HRE, Chinese, and French. So the HRE and French stay the same. Chinese is the one that replaced it, and that makes perfect sense in my eyes because Chinese has those bow chads, as everyone likes to call them, that are very dangerous. But they also just have the ability to boom up behind it, as well as have a good fishing eco, have a good just overall eco, and have good military ships that can
Yeah,
take over
yeah, those
that big
ships build
water.
faster, right? That's the
I'm not for sure. I just know that their ships are still have the ability. You used to always hear these, oh wow, these feudal ships for Abbasid and Delhi aren't even worth building because they're so weak. Well, Chinese ships are actually strong on as far as kind of all the age groups go.
mm, yep. Well, I guess we can talk about Golden League now. So here's the bracket I got pulled up. So round two started this last weekend. We're now down to the final six, and I sort of expected it to be wide open. I thought some lower rated players would come in with some unique strategies to catch people off guard. But here we are, top six. It's all people that were at N4C. And it feels like this round really just tested who really knew the civs inside and out because they were put in different situations than they normally would be, and it's just all the guys with the most experience. It kind of rose to the top.
Yeah, it's exactly that. There were a couple people that just how I heard a lot of mentions. Hey, there might be some unexpected names get through, and there were a lot of close games. I think a lot of games had some. slight variances that could have turned them the other way easily, and that could have just one little fight or one little misclick almost had the effect of the overall game or overall series. So we could have seen some differences in the long term, but it's still, there's other people that are right there on the cusp, and it's not like you're seeing 2-0, 3-0s, just complete dominance. You still see, the Muslim getting taken out in the winners bracket and having to fight through the redemption bracket. It's not like these people aren't losing series or aren't having close games. So that's the key, that there's still competitiveness there, even though there is a tier above. It seems like.
Yeah. So I mean, even though the top six in this round kind of chalk, like it does create some interesting uh, scenarios for next round as far as points go, because B got knocked out a lot earlier this time. He finished top 8 last time. And then, the Muslim, Lenok, and Lucifron, who didn't place as well last time, well, now they're going to get top 6 points. And so,
Hmm.
how does it all shake out? Sort of got knocked out super early. So he's probably he needs to like finish top 3 if he wants to make it into the top 8. So it really shook things up.
Yeah, exactly. So there were a couple people that, I know we can see them on the screen there, Wham and Puppy Paul, that were right on the cusp here from last week, that if they had gotten to that top 6, it basically secures them that,
Yeah,
the guarantee final 8 spot. But now they're going to have to fight a little more next week, make sure that they don't have one of those early round slip ups, and really get a little bit further than what they had to, they might have been able to breathe a little bit more. But people, just how you mentioned B, he's going to have to fight more to get back and earn that spot. And the Muslim, it depends this week. We'll have to monitor those people that you mentioned that weren't top 8 last week, that now are going to either be top 6 or could potentially win it all this week, and basically guarantee their final 8 spot.
yeah, yeah. So definitely the two most impactful series this week, as far as points were concerned, was that Wham versus the Muslim and Puppy Paw versus Lenok. And, the way both of those game threes went could have gone either way.
Yeah, the Wham to Muslim is one of the big interesting ones that was on. Was that the third one on the King of the Hill with Abbasid versus English? It might have been their second one.
Yeah, no, it was game three, and I don't know how Wham
Yes.
lost.
So that was the one that, just how we mentioned, the Dark Age Men at Arms rush from earlier, different build that we see, and Wham was ready for it. He adapted, he hit Castle, but the big problem was all his food sources were on the outskirts, the edges, and he wasn't able to kind of clear up the towers in front of his base and resecure any safe food source. And that's where, Muslim was able to take advantage of multiple minutes without any food income at all. Will really have that effect on your army count, your military count, your villager count, and everything. So he took that advantage and pushed through big. But that's where, he had Wham was, it felt like ahead at one point in that match. Wham was ahead in villager count and in military count. And it felt like it was about to be another, the Muslim getting out a little bit early, and he is one of the big names that people like to watch and see.
Yeah, I mean Wham hit feudal like several minutes before, and he got his second town center up, no problem. He was pretty much unharassed for a few minutes, kind of while he ramped up, and yeah, I guess just the food got him. Maybe.
Yeah, he needed to clear those towers that were right in front of his base, because that's really where the Muslim put that, almost like that wall I was talking about. But the
Mm.
Muslim didn't even get to the point where he needed siege. He just had longbows and a massive men at arms that he said, "Hey, you're not going to be able to come to this line of towers, and I'm just going to keep dropping back to this and not losing as many units and really making that difference there."
Yeah, with how far ahead he was, kind of wondering, King of the Hill now with the new configuration, the wood is practically unlimited. So if he would just went heavy into wood and just threw down farms earlier, because I know that's a painful transition, but he
There
might have been
was
far enough ahead to make that work
there
seamlessly.
was a point where he did, it seemed like, had a lot of floating wood. But and I actually was casting it at the time, and I was saying build farms, build a market. There were a lot of options, but it's hard to, obviously it's easier watching it than it is while
Oh
playing.
yeah, yeah, oh
I'm
yeah,
sure
for sure.
he didn't make that realization that he was out of food until Castle hit, and he was like, I don't have any food. Uh-oh.
Yep.
Because really, if he had any food resources built up, he could have spammed those heavy armored units because the Muslim wasn't castle and really, retaken that foothold forward. But my thing on King of the Hill now is I have seen time and time again, and I said that before the WIM, the Muslim game, is the food sources now. You see a lot of times it's forward berries. Your other food sources are out farther on the side, so you always have to secure your secondary source, or you're going to get put in contention where you're going to run out of food and see exactly what we saw in that game.
Yep. Yeah, and then Puppy Paw Leonock, game three was a French mirror, and I don't know if this made the difference, but Puppy Paw did get hit with the deer carcass bug.
Yeah, it's always easier to say that makes a difference on the outside, which it definitely. I mean, if you think about that's every villager that gets killed has a huge effect. I think about the first villager gets killed, I'm immediately like, oh, that person has a strong lead, and it's like, well, that's multiple villagers that aren't working at all.
Mm,
But it definitely that's one of the downsides currently in the meta to going professional scouts, which I know the twins of Puppy Paw and Wham are professional scout lovers. So I'm sure that they'll get that bug fixed here in no time, though. And it's just how we said, it's easy to fix as far as if you spot it, but it's all about actually spotting it while you're playing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's more pressing things to focus on when you're
Exactly.
playing against Leonock,
And
So
yeah, also in that game, if I remember it correctly, I think Leonot got quite a buildup of his knights and just kind of had a outmassed knights that Puppy Paw wasn't able to do anything about just
yeah,
because
he
there were
was
so many.
Leonock felt like he was more active on the map.
Yeah, it just seemed like, with the French, with their ability to for their knights to heal, if you get a knight out at one health, it's gonna be a full knight eventually if with pros because they're so good at microing those around, pulling their weaker knights back during fights, you'll see them pull one knight back and then even maybe send it back in for another charge because it, gained a little bit of health back or redirected the fire from the opponent. So that's really where he was able to build up those knights over time. One turns into three, turns into 10, and then that 10 knights is a pretty unstoppable force.
Yep.
Even with 15 spearmen sitting there bracing, the
Yep.
knights will do pretty good work against those.
And speaking of French knights, I'm not going to say France is a hard counter to the boar strat, but they did fare. It seemed like they fared well.
Yeah, so that's one of the things you saw that matchup a ton this past week. The boar strat was the new big thing everyone was talking about, and I do agree. It does seem like French has the upper foothold because Rus has knights, French has knights, but Rus's knights aren't as good as French knights, and
Yep.
the boar gives you a little bit better of an economy. Well, French's economy already is a little bit better with cheaper villagers over time or faster villagers over time. And so that's really where French kind of has these balances that immediately just has a one little foothold above Roos as far as that matchup goes, in my opinion.
Yep.
But we did see it's still quite a bit of a skill matchup, but I would say the foothold goes to the French side.
Yeah, and I saw kind of a couple different ways that French could combat it. So Wham, I think it was against B. He just split B's attention so much that he was able to keep raiding the boar villagers and keep taking their health down before they could get into the tower, and then eventually he just killed them all.
Yeah.
And then there's another game, I can't remember who, they just built the critical mass of knights and burnt down the outpost, and then the boar was done. So
Yeah, so what I've actually seen a lot lately is people not focusing as much on the boar, and once that happens, they'll just focus on the actual town center
yeah.
raids, and because that outpost has quite a bit of defense, if the pros are quicker to react and see it ahead of time, it's just damage going down that isn't worth anything. But just how we mentioned that knight takes a little bit of damage, it'll come back around after it heals up. You see, some of the pros they'll actually end up dropping a tower right outside of range, but when it upgrades, it'll be in range of the actual boar carcass and
Mm-hmm.
fully deny the boar as well. So there's a couple different viable counter options there to the boar strat, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more come up in the going weeks with the boar being so popular. Actually, now we see a new barbecue boar rush.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
So
gonna
that is
say, what other civs are we gonna see do this? Because I saw
yeah.
a couple Borbicans this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. So barbecuing on the boar has now been a thing. I actually just, I obviously am watch a bunch of, Twitch streams, and I have seen the question pop up multiple times, is it worth going for the boar's English? And it's like, who knows if it is or isn't. Obviously, they have those cheap farms that build faster, but if they're able to have that massive army, have that map control, put a tower down, it's already going to have that network of castles, have that defense. I mean, it's like almost like a, well, if it's there, why not? Or maybe
Yeah.
they utilize it to deny it from your opponent. There's a couple different options, but you'll start to see other civs than just Rus, France, and now we see Chinese already doing it. Are we going to see others except for Delhi and Abbasid? They are not allowed to.
Yeah. Um, I saw a thumbnail on one of Drongo's videos that the HRE was going for the boars. I think it was a Golden League game, so I'm gonna have to watch that. I haven't yet, but that'd be interesting. With the prelate, it gets food super fast if you're able to defend it.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that it seems like is one of the downsides to HRE is obviously they want to hit that fast castle. They want to have their economy all tight and safe. I know
Mm.
going for the boar, you know, isn't that tight, safe economy, but if you're able to secure the boar side and then secure your own economy, that's one less resource to think about. You're not going to have to go out for your berries or to a deer patch or anything like that. You're going to be able to say, hey, I got the boar, I got my sheep, and I'm going to hit castle and then secure those relics. And you might even see, the boar right next to a relic where that tower securing the boar also secures a relic in the long term.
What if you see a HRE boar minework feudal all in?
Yeah, you never know here with the new abilities, the new options out there. You might see some crazy stuff here in the Golden League games with the long series that you might have.
Yep. Another series I thought was really interesting was Lucifron Marine Lord, and Lucifron had his chances. French Mirror, he had the upper hand, and he forgot about the guild hall. Had about 9,000 food in there. Definitely, probably would have made the difference.
When you say that sheer number in general of 9,000, I think 9,000 resources over the course of any game will have a huge, huge effect. But, that is obviously a compounding effect that each minute that he doesn't gather that, it does gather more up to a cap, but he needed to gather it because that would have been, he could have at one point hit Fast Imperial probably way ahead that he didn't need to hit, or, things of that sort where he could have just all of a sudden pumped out nonstop nights or traded and built a wonder. But no, obviously not the wonder game.
Yep. And then the third game he lost, he was Abbasid. I can't. It was on King of the Hill, I believe. I can't remember who Marine Lord picked, but it seemed like Lucifron had the lead for most of that game too, and it just kind of evaporated. So
Yeah,
that could have
Marine
easily
Lord
been 3-1 the other way.
Yeah, Marine Lord has this thing where it seems like a lot of the other players would be in the same position as him and react and have this high heart rate and be all nervous, and it just seems like he's cool a lot of the times. He'll be behind, he'll think of other ways, he'll defend raids, and then he'll slowly claw his way back into the game where it just seems like, it all of a sudden it's just like, oh, he's now ahead. All right, Marine Lord, he never got nervous. All right.
Yep. Well, that's why he and BC are meeting in the winners bracket finals again, second round in a row. So
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Beastie's gonna be able to pull this one out against Marine Lord and take the full weekend this week, or if Marine Lord's just gonna kind of secure that top spot.
yeah. And so got to talk about BC and Viper. We saw a wonder victory, so I never thought that would happen in a pro game, but here we are.
Yeah, the one thing obviously that a lot of people will talk about is you could tell by Viper's reaction and actions in the game that I don't know if he knew the Wonder ever got built.
Oh,
I,
people in the chat were saying
he
they must have
didn't
been watching BC stream. that he typed in the chat that said, "Oh, I didn't
Exactly.
even
Yeah.
notice."
He basically said he didn't even realize until the bells dinged, and then at that point it was too late. I think he was getting, outpost upgrades on 15 different towers, which you would never waste all of that stone and things on a defensive upgrade when you need to push forward and kill something that's going to win the game and you're counting down. So
Yeah.
yes, but even still it was I think with that amount of resources, just how we talked about earlier, that amount of resources for pros, I think BC still would have had the ability to, poke a hole through finally in one of those long games, or outmatch, or fully deplete the map of other resources, and then that way, put that foothold forward. But it's obviously hard to say when the outcome was the wonder victory that we never saw what happened.
Yeah. Well, happy the wonder exists because that would have been a long, long, long game. I think that would have put last round's BC versus Marine Lord game to shame.
Ah, yes, the other very quite long game. Um, but we are starting to see a lot, some other longer games here, which just shows the Civ matchups, shows that these pros are starting to figure out counters, starting to figure out ways to extend the game and not fully, it's not a thing like I think a lot of other RTSs and other games. There's one little small like small thing will happen early and it's like, well, that's game over. There's no way to come back from this at all. Well, AOE4, it shows, hey, there's always a possible way to come back.
Did you BC on his stream and he uploaded this to YouTube went over his match against Bruh did and just like how to come back from a game. It was nuts. Like his town center was destroyed. He had like no military. There were knights like in his base, and he somehow came back and won the game.
Yeah, so that just kind of, I think that video shows it itself, that says, hey, you know, that what you just said, town center destroyed, no these things are like, okay, well, there's no possible way. Well, there clearly was a possible way, where in other games, someone's military's in your base, you have no economy and production, what are you going to do? You're probably going to just surrender and quit. Well, Beastie didn't. He pulled it out. He pulled that dub, and obviously his renowned for kind of extending games to the long haul, and winning those long games.
Yep. Um, Another fun series. So at the very end of day one, they cast "Give You Anxiety" and "Kill Jardy" because I think it was one of the only things going on that late,
That was the
and
last game of the day.
that
It
was
was it.
especially game one of that series is just one of my favorite age games I've ever watched. Like it was so silly.
Yeah, so I think GUA, a lot of people know him around the AOE4 scene. He was one of the earlier players on the beta, earlier grinders of the ladder, just always kind of playing earlier on, and so he kind of got that name around. But Kiljardy, not many people had heard of, so it was a shock to see him, make that upset, extend a lot of those matches, and yeah, some of those some of those games just did not. There were things that you didn't see in any other age game, which is, I guess, perfect for the name of that weekend, which is the non-meta weekend.
Yeah, just goes to show you you don't necessarily need the biggest names to put on really entertaining matches. So especially like day one where there's so many games going on, it's impossible to live cast them all. Hoping some of these content creators like Killer Pigeon or Drongo can find some more gems for us.
Yeah, so I know both of them do a great job at kind of coming back and casting a lot of the games that weren't picked up by the mainstream. I know there's other casters as well that do the same. I know that I actually myself tried to cast games that were, anytime that the weekend's going on, I'll cast, and I'll make sure to cast games that aren't on the main channel to do that exact thing, to give the ability for people to watch the games that they didn't want to, or that aren't just on the main channel, that they didn't think they had the opportunity to. So I definitely did that exact thing, covered all a bunch of games that weren't on there, and I'll try to get some of those uploaded to YouTube here in the
Yeah,
next week or so as well.
yeah. Recon took out B. That'd be
That
one I'd want to watch.
Yeah, so I watched it. I did not cast that one, but that's definitely a super interesting one. I tend to follow. I think the first one I covered was Core Donardi. I
Mm,
followed a lot of the Puppet Paw and Wham games, as well as just some other varied games throughout of some of the other big names.
yeah. All right, so this upcoming weekend, we're down to the final six. So on Saturday, I believe, I'm not sure what order these are going to be played, but you're going to have,
The Muslims game, I believe, is the first game.
yeah, so you're going to get Lucifron to Muslim, Viper Leenock, I believe the winner of that series, and then Marine Lord BC Cutie on all on Saturday, and then Sunday you're gonna get this game and then the
Correct.
finals.
Yeah, I think that is the correct order and exactly how it'll go.
Yeah.
So, what are your bets? Who do you think's moving through, and who's going to I guess who's going to move it through to the finals? The final end weekend, and then who's gonna win it all as well?
You mean just for round two?
Yeah,
Or
just for round two. We're not
yeah,
going further out. We still don't even have solid expectations for the third round yet of what to the deep dive into the rules.
yeah. Uh so Lucifron to Muslim I think is super interesting. Based on how Lucifron looked against Marine Lord, where he was just a couple of big blunders away, but like the rest of his game looks so good. Like I think he's pretty strong. Uh, I think he takes out the Muslim. Oh, Viper Leenock. I think Viper takes it. I think BC gets Marine Lord. Oh, I think we might see like a Viper BC final.
Okay. So I'm with you on the I think well actually I'm with you on the Viper. I think the Viper not only beats Leenock, I think he beats either the Muslim or Lucifron. But I'm actually since you went with Lucifron, I'll go with the Muslim. I think he's been putting in some work. He's been playing a lot of games, and so I think we'll see the Muslim Viper. Viper will pull through there, and then I think we're going to see Marine Lord Viper, and just
Yeah,
one of those future classics in general, big names out there, and I'm gonna go with the Viper is finally showing his he is back in the game. He is dominant on the AOE4 scene as well as the two scene that he always has been.
yeah. Um, I think this as kind of looking forward to how the final eight shapes up. The most impactful series is going to be Viper Leenock. So if you're Puppy Paw, Wham, B, you really want Leenock to lose
Yeah. So I
because
and as we both just guessed, we think the Viper is favored here, but is that how it's going to end up playing out? You never
yeah,
know. Leanox seems to be a player that he's just like all like perfection, that lean octopus that everyone talks about. It seems like there's eight of him all over the map, and then sometimes it feels like he just has some of those bigger blunder mistakes that you're like he's just maybe I know he's on the different time zone. Maybe it gets late for him and he needs a little bit of sleep, but you never really know.
yeah. So so Viper last week got fourth. So if he finishes top four again, like he's pretty much in. Um, and then so BC Marine Lord and Vortex with Vortex's second place finish last week. They're in. So that would be four spots pretty comfortably locked up. Um, but if Leonok goes through and like finishes top three, well then that's five players that are pretty much in a
Yeah,
really good position.
it doesn't really open that field up as much as the
And
other way, and
and plus, one of the Muslim and uh, Lucifron is going to be top four. So
yeah.
that's kind of another player you have to contend with. So those spots, looked like okay, we might get some up and comers into the top eight. Well, depending on how this weekend goes, a lot of those spots could kind of get gobbled up here.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, what happens if 7, 8, 9, and 10 all tie with the same amount of points? Are we gonna see a playoff? Are we gonna see, oh, they're gonna have to play a best of seven, and the winning two gets in or not? I wonder if there is the ability to kind of have that tie where, we might have to see that, and or if there's a way that they probably have something in the rule book that whether it be off of rank or whatnot
Yeah,
to.
I don't know what the tiebreaker is. If it's like overall record from all the series, I don't know.
Yeah, so it'd be obviously not all the rules are out. I'm sure that's been asked. I'm sure that is there's answers to it already, but that is another interesting one that we may see that play out. only time will tell with round two just gonna come to a close this weekend, and then round three starting here in not too long after that.
Yep. So yeah, excited for this weekend, especially like I said, that Leonok versus Viper game, pretty impactful. And then yeah, Lucifron or the Muslim, if they go through and then they upset, let's say Viper comes through or Leonok, like that's the worst case scenario for like Wham and Puppy Paw, is if Leonok
And
wins and
B,
then
yeah, as
Lucifron
well.
wins and they meet and then Lucifron beats Leonok and so he's like in the top three and it's just a big giant mess.
Yeah, there's a lot of different outcomes that can happen, but I'm sure we'll see some great games here this weekend, and great ones following that after. It's just we'll see how it plays out.
That's right. So I guess before we head off here, any fun mods that you've come across?
So I have actually I didn't think I would delve into the mods as much as I have. And obviously I think the big name mods have all kind of been tested out, and people have heard about Castle Blood and some of these other ones. Nomad, Mega Random, Dire Wolf, some of these other ones have been really fun, but I think the biggest mods that I think are the fun ones are just kind of seeing the new generated maps. There's been a couple different ones. I don't have the specific names out there, but there's been multiple ones that I've played, whether it be a 3v3 map or whether it be a smaller 2v2 map. But those generated maps just shows the ability of the future that can happen, and the only the world's at our fingertips out there with the map generation and ability to do so now.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. Just
There's a
maps
map out
generated
there.
specifically for team games. I
Yeah,
haven't played too many of them, but man, I played like a 4v4 on Dry Arabia the other day, and it's just like, oh my god, the map is so big.
yes.
Like,
So there's a modded map out there that is a specific multiple player team map that is smaller. It cuts off the edges.
mm-hmm.
And so it's a smaller map for teams. And so that's literally one of the exact fixes. People complain, oh, hey, well, now there's an 8v8 team map that's much smaller that you can, or 4v4 team map, not 8v8, that you can play that and have that ability to play on that smaller map, have, closer fights and not feel like, your opponent's hitting castle age by the time your four longbows that you made from your early council hall get across the map to pressure his base.
Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm excited to hop on and try some more stuff. But you got anything else?
No, that's about it. Obviously, just excited for the future AOE4, just continuing to play, to cast, to get some games in, and we'll see that ranked level out here in the in the coming days and weeks, and we'll start to see who's going to be those conquerors, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. So I was busy last night. I'm going on vacation this weekend, so I'm gonna have to hit the ladder pretty hard next week. But
Oh, there you
I'm
go.
gonna get on there.
Sounds like a plan. Well,
Yep.
thanks everyone for showing out, saying what's up, and we will end up catching you on the next episode here. Anything
All
else on
right.
your
Yeah.
end?
See y'all later.